Are we live?
Live.
Not on the channel. Let me
I
refresh
have no idea if we're live or not. Actually, it's not on the channel yet.
It's still waiting for Ruby Ronin.
Yeah, what the fuck?
11 people waiting.
Fuck. Hang on. Let me go back to here.
Oh,
Yeah, we are.
I have no idea.
We're live. If we're live or not? Actually,
We are
Okay.
live. Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, guys. What a fucking shag. Okay.
Steve has been
Welcome.
working so hard. His
We're
head is
live.
smoking.
Well, that's that happens when I touch Java. Actually, I haven't touched JavaScript in a while. So it's it's let me see if I can. I'm trying to find the chat.
It's there. We are live. Yes.
Cool.
My chat widget is not working. Okay. Oh, yes it is. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Everything is working. Holy shit. Okay. Welcome. what a
We are live indeed.
Oh, what a fucking shag. Oh, I apologize. I realized about 10 minutes before we started that I didn't have the proper software installed to reroute audio and stuff. And so I apologize. We are almost 20 minutes late. This is
No problem.
Ruby Ronin. Let's introduce ourselves. Gavin, why don't you go first?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Gavin. I'm probably the least exciting person in this group. I've been writing software since I was a kid, really. Since I think I was about 12 years old when I first started learning HTML and JavaScript. I've been writing Ruby and working basically full-time in Ruby since 2008. Have been fairly active in the Ruby community, a few gem contributions, a couple of contributions to the Rails code base, a fairly neglected Ruby on Rails blog, and yeah, I was very active in the Ruby Motion community for a while as well. So
we need to talk about that. Awesome.
yeah, we can. I really enjoy Ruby Motion.
Awesome.
But yeah, I've been mostly writing Ruby and or like web related software for the majority of my life. And now I'm a tech lead and senior engineer at a company called Pleo.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Lucian, you go next.
All right. So I'm Lucian, and I think I'm working with Ruby since probably 2007. Before that, I worked with some PHP and Python, and I discovered Ruby at a hosting company, introduced by some very good friends of mine that were working there. And I'm coding Ruby since then, but I did also in this career a lot of other type of jobs. So in the last period, I'm starting to call myself a polymorphic Ruby developer.
He walks like a duck.
Yeah, something like this. Or I know I did a lot of stuff, but I'm focused currently. I'm working as a senior Ruby developer, and I'm also started to get more involved in the Ruby community. I was in a way a silent consumer for many years, but in the last 2 or 3 years, I decided to help a bit the community or put myself out there and try to help. And I'm curating a newsletter that is called Short Ruby, and I'm trying now to start some other projects around that as well.
Awesome. So I'm Stephen Baker. My pronouns are please like and subscribe. When did I start Ruby? No, I've been doing Ruby for like 25 years. I want that to be a future discussion. We're going to talk about that. I've been getting paid to write software since 1997, I think. I focus on quality and maintainability and reliability type things. I hate most things in the software industry, largely because I hate capitalism, not necessarily because I hate software. yeah, that's probably good enough. I guess some people might know me. People like when I say this, and I don't like necessarily saying it. I created RSpec. That was not that interesting. What is interesting that I am proud of, I'm not necessarily proud of RSpec. Um, I'm proud of the things that it carried on, and there's, I talked at Yuruko about that a lot, and I can post a link at some point. I have code in Minitest, which is way more impressive. I wrote Minitest mock on an airplane, and that was fucking cool. So yeah, so that's me. I am consultant. I just help teams build software better, often using Ruby because that's a great way to build great software. And I hope that will be what this becomes, is sort of a way for us to agree on the ways that Ruby makes life easier. So yeah, so this is the first episode. I think we vaguely intend to do this weekly. Is that correct?
Yeah, sounds like a good approximation.
Awesome. I think I chose Tuesday because of the Stones song Ruby Tuesday. That's when all of the Ruby things happen. And because I live in the woods in Sweden, I thought I didn't have a local nerd community or a local Ruby community. And what I learned today, actually, is that there is a local nerd community. And the local nerd community includes people who happen to write software but prefer to play with their tractors, which also is me.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, there are a few things. I've been doing this professionally for almost 30 years. There are many things that I have opinions on. We can talk about my software licensing opinions another time. That's what my other streams were for. Oh shit! I should have done the Simpsons thing. Hello, I'm Stephen Baker. You may know me from Dos Amigos or Objective C Retain. But no, this is Ruby Ronin, and we are here to talk about basically how Ruby improves our lives in various ways. And I thought that it would be a nice way to start for each of us to talk about how we found Ruby, and later why we love Ruby. And I'm gonna point to Lucian first. And I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your. Am I pronouncing your name okay for an English person?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the international pronunciation, official one.
Thank you. I grew up in a half French country. Well, not half French.
No worries. This is how everybody, like working in an international setting, this is how everybody is calling me. So it's like, that's the correct pronunciation. International.
I don't come from a half French country. I come from like a 10% French country, but it's half French in theory, because we didn't kill all the French people when we showed up. So there is that. So Lucian, why don't you tell us about how you found Ruby, and what you came from, how you found Ruby, and why Ruby stuck for you?
Yeah. So I don't know, during the faculty, I started at one in the faculty I studied, or even before, I was working with Turbo Pascal.
Nice.
And in the high school, I think, or something like that. And in the faculty, I learned C and Java, and I don't know, some other academic languages. All very nice. I don't say not. But meanwhile, I was working with a friend that he had a small, now we'll call it startup, but a small project that was doing for internet cafes at that period. That was the period where I was in the faculty.
Nice.
And he wanted to rewrite that in PHP to put a browser and run in the browser everything, because I think before that was Borland Delphi. And I started to pick up, I was playing a bit with PHP, and I started to work on that. And I did my license in something like databases in PHP and stored, I don't know, like an advertising server, or I don't know, serving some data directly from a database via PHP, whatever. I was working with PHP, and then I got hired to a company, the hosting company, and there I work a bit with PHP, and then I started working on a backend system that was configuring Linux servers. This was a hosting company, and automatically deploying, I don't know, web services, configuring it, and so on with Python. And also a team that was in Romania working for this company was already started, had a project. Okay, these are memories, but I try to put them one by one. They had a project to do very quickly that was to create an order form for people to. Okay, it was 2006, 2007, right? So now this is very normal, but something like you wanted to put your domain and to type the name of an email, and everything should have been provisioned automatically. And that should have been like a shopping cart kind of experience. And one person that in that team, he knew Ruby, and he wrote it in Rails. I think it was Ruby 1.8, something like this. I remember we were patching.
That was when Ruby was perfected, 1.8.
Yeah, but I remember we were patching on Linux some XML library for some reason.
Yes,
I don't remember
were.
what.
Yes.
Something, yeah.
Yep.
And also Rails, probably Rails pre version 2, but I don't remember 1.9 or something like this when I joined. And then he did the proof of concept of demo of this, which was very well received and also very fast to develop. And so our team transitioned to work on that, and we received some trainings from this guy and another colleague of mine. We received a training, and I started to like it a lot. It was. This is what I said at one point, and I like to talk about that more, because now I made it as my personal goal to try to convince people to use the new features. I liked a lot back then that Ruby felt very weird in a way, very different than the other stuff. It was like people were, when I was meeting with my colleagues from faculty or some other friends and explaining, okay, I'm learning Ruby, what is that? And I started to explain a bit the syntax. Everybody was, oh, okay, blocks and everything, it's an object, and how can you do all that stuff and so on. But and when I was showing a piece of code with the kind of DSL, everything felt very, maybe not weird, very esoteric, I would call it. I don't know. Like, this should not be possible with a programming language, right? That is, and this is how I got the feeling with it. And I enjoyed it since then. And responding to the last question a bit, and we can go deeper, why I love Ruby is that somehow it matches a lot the way I think about the solution, and I can transpose it, or I don't model it in the code. I think it matches more. It might be, I don't know, the way it looks, or maybe because I can be biased because I'm using it for a long period, so of course it's also a habit. But I like a lot the ability that somehow a kind of solution that is like a pseudocode, I can scratch it very quickly and make it run with not too much effort. And actually, this I will finish my short speech about this. I actually consider that Ruby is a very good language to learn as a programming language first for people who don't know coding. And I'm talking learning to code, not learning coding concepts. I know that, okay, maybe some other languages people are saying they're implementing, I don't know, better something, some concept. But I'm talking about the ability to be able to code, to make the computer do something. I think Ruby is a very fit language. I think this is a feature that is under, or how to say, an attribute of Ruby, or a feature that is somehow under used or under promoted in a way. But that's a personal opinion. Yes. So stick back to you.
Awesome. Yeah. No, that's great. I'm gonna go second just so we can rotate a little bit. So I first learned about Ruby. So I mean I got started a fucking long time ago. Thank you. I'm just getting drinks delivered. Sorry. Thank you.
Nice.
it's a neat thing. I have this app on my phone called Signal, and if I go into Signal
That's nice. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I choose my wife and I tell her what I want, it shows up in my office. It's really nice, actually. It's a pretty neat hack. So, um, so I'm just making a note here for something we can talk about next because I think it's cool. So, I got started. Fuck. I think I was like 6 years old when I first wrote a computer program on. I think it was a VIC-20. We had a VIC-20 attached to like a TV. I wish I still had this TV. It was amazing. It was a little CRT TV. It was, covered in wood veneer. It was great, and it had to turn it on, and the volume you had to turn a little knob, and the knob had a rubber band around it for texture.
Yeah.
And the rubber band fell off, and so my dad went to the hardware store and bought a new rubber gasket that would fit, and then put the rubber gasket on it, and then he got a drill press and a scroll saw and made like a textured piece of hardwood, probably walnut or something. It was fantastic. And so I got that, and of course do you guys remember, fuck, I might be dating myself. I think we're all about the same age, but I might be a little bit earlier in the time for you guys than. So I was 6 in 1989-ish. And so magazines would come out with program listings, right? And you'd type in the program listing and hope you got every character correct so you could play the game or run the application. And the first application that I wrote for myself was... It was a hockey trivia game. And I told this story before in my keynote at Yuruko last year. But basically, I made a hockey trivia game with ask you questions about hockey. And the first question was, who's the best hockey player ever? And the answer was Wayne Gretzky. But my dad played this game the first time, and it asked him that question. He wrote in Bobby Orr. And now the hockey fans, if there are any hockey fans in our, in the audience, they'll know Bobby Orr is probably the best hockey player of all time. Bobby Orr or Guy Lafleur, or depends on where you go. Wayne Gretzky is the best at a whole bunch of shit. The guy just reinvented the game. But my dad typed in Bobby Orr, and it told him, "You're wrong." And my dad turned to me and said, "Son, your software has a bug in it." Because it told me Bobby Orr was the wrong answer. And I said, "Shit. I can't disagree with you exactly. There are possibly multiple correct answers to who is the greatest of all time." Right? I mean, there's also, I'm Canadian. I can go down a fucking... I'm a Canadian who lives in Örnsköldsvik, Sweden. Which is, if you don't know anything about hockey, Örnsköldsvik is where all of the best hockey players in Sweden come from. Peter Forsberg is like my neighbor. And so I became obsessed with software quality. Because when I had this question and answer thing, it was just simple text matching, right? And my dad typed in Bobby Orr, but he didn't use a capital letter and stuff, right? And so I then had to, in my not QBasic, this was VIC-20, like Commodore Basic, I had to learn how subroutines work to do string manipulation and shit. And that was some wild shit on a computer that was connected to a TV. And in the chat we have Rocketnescu saying the best hockey player of all time, the great one, no debate. I am not so convinced that Wayne Gretzky is necessarily the best of all time. The thing I am convinced of is that Sidney Crosby does not even rank in the best of all time. But best of all time, when I was growing up, now prior to me growing up, this has become a discussion about hockey, and I do love a tangent. Your hockey knowledge is limited to Happy Gilmore. All right. So, greatest. I mean, they do call Gretzky the Great One, and he really changed the game in a lot of ways. And I don't want to take away from that, but he's not the only one. Before him, there was Bobby Orr, there was Eddie Shack, there was what's his name? He played 3 playoff games with a broken foot before he went to the hospital. Because if you just tie your skate really tight, you just stop feeling that your foot is broken. Like
in music, you always have these people. Like, there's always the person who just defines a new like change in trajectory of the curve of the art. If you like.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Wayne Gretzky definitely did that. Like, Wayne Gretzky paved the way for everyone that came after him. Absolutely. But Bobby Orr was a defenseman. Bobby Orr played at the back of the play, and put up numbers that no other defenseman could put up in the time that he put them up, right? I mean, when I was a kid, there was Ray Bourque, who was another defenseman that just put up just endless numbers. But the point of this story is that my dad pointed out a bug in my software, and I thought, well, shit, I need to be able to extend my software to accept multiple possible inputs. And that's how I learned about subroutines. Like, this was just a line of print this, get this, check it. Like, you know, and that was my first interaction with refactoring, which when you're doing Commodore Basic, you have to just you have to rewrite the lines because every line usually has a number.
Yeah.
And so Dad pointed that out, and I fixed it. But I became obsessed with software quality. And so I started looking, and that's how I got in the Agile community and the XP community. The Agile community came later. And I started doing a lot of software in you know, I did a bunch of web apps, you know, small things. My first paid applications were not web apps. The first one that I actually got money for was Visual Basic with a bit of Visual C++ in it. I built a package manager for Windows so that people could install their cable modem drivers easier from a floppy disk. And I tell that story in my Yuruko keynote, which I'll find the link and paste it somewhere. I mean, just fucking look for it. Google can help you. And I worked in a lot of different languages. So at my first government job, I worked in PHP and Python and Perl and a whole bunch of different things. And I had these 3 web applications. One of them was in PHP, one was in Perl, and one was in Python. And a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, you really like small talk. I bet you really like... He said, you really like object-oriented programming, because I hadn't discovered small talk yet. He said, if you like object-oriented programming, you like Perl. And I didn't hate Perl at the time. I still don't. I don't really hate programming languages. I hate programming people. I don't hate JavaScript, the language. I hate people who use JavaScript. That's the... Yeah, I don't hate JavaScript. I hate JavaScript people. So he came to me and said, hey, like, you know, you'll probably really like Ruby. It's like it's like Perl, but it's got objects. And I was like, Perl 5 has objects. Why the fuck would I ever want this Ruby thing that nobody uses? And so I completely dismissed it. And this is in like 1999, 2000-ish. And then, you know, moving along. And then another friend said, hey, you like small talk? You should try Ruby. Ruby is like Smalltalk, but that you can run, that interacts with the rest of the world. And I said, holy shit, that's exactly what I've always been looking for. That's what I want. And so I tried Ruby and I absolutely fell in love with it. And this would have been 2000, mid to late 2000, early 2001. Tried Ruby and absolutely loved it. And we can talk more about why we love Ruby. We'll punt that down the road. And that's how I got started in Ruby. It was the first time somebody sent Ruby to me. They said it's it's like Perl but object oriented, and I said, "Fuck you." And then the next person said it's like Smalltalk but it talks to the rest of the world in Unix land, and I was like, "Hell yeah, that's exactly what I want." And it's weird to me, and we could probably do another whole episode on this, about how the framing of the solution changes the nature of the problem, right?
Mhm.
Because I flat rejected Ruby when somebody told me it's like Perl but has object orientation. And I fell in love with Ruby when somebody said it's object orientation that talks to the rest of the world. And Ruby didn't change in that time frame. But the way it was described to me changed. And I absolutely fell in love with it immediately, and I followed the Ruby community from then on. And I write in, I write in 6 to 8 languages a day, and I have shipped software to production in 36 languages or more. Like, I'm not a language bigot, and the reason is Smalltalk is perfect and Lisp is perfect, and something is perfect when there's nothing that you can remove, right? That's when something is perfect. That's why Smalltalk and Lisp are perfect. But Ruby is Smalltalk and Lisp that interacts with the Unix environment, which is the environment, which is shit, by the way. Unix is fucked, and everyone should read the Unix Haters Handbook. Please immediately go find the Unix Haters Handbook and read all of it. But that's how I fell in love with Ruby. Ruby was because of how it was presented to me, and Ruby is lovely. And I think that's all I have to say about that for now. Gavin, how did you get started in Ruby?
Is just to follow that quote, is not Ruby is lovely, so Mats is lovely, or
Right.
That's nice, and so are we.
right. I do actually. I'm going to make a note. We're going to talk about the Ruby community. Yeah, please. So Gavin, tell us about how you got into Ruby.
Yeah, so I I caught on to one thing you said at the end there as well that I wanted to just expand on. When you said something's perfect when nothing can be taken away from it. So we had these like study journals in high school, and each page had a different quote from a notable person at the bottom of it. And I still remember that being one of the quotes in one of our high school study journals, and that was like one quote that stood out to me more than any of the others.
Where does it come from? Do you remember who said it?
No, but I can remember the quote verbatim. I think it's perfection is achieved not when nothing can be added, but when nothing more can be taken away.
That's probably a good Google search phrase for when you're not telling us about how you came to Ruby.
Right. No. They might just go, hey, Lucian, can you bring that up?
Dude, I have ADD. I am an expert manager of other people's distractions.
I wandered into Ruby. I wandered into Ruby almost blindly and almost out of necessity. I've always had computers around me. My dad worked as an engineer and so did computer programming, and then became a teacher and teaches technology. So I kind of had a lucky head start as a kid that we always had computers in the house. You know, the early programming software that they would give to high school kids to teach them programming basics. I was playing with that when I was a kid. when I was about, I think, 12 or 13, I got introduced to HTML and JavaScript, and I thought this is cool. So like typical nerd fashion, right? This was just my toy. I'd be sitting in my room playing HTML and JavaScript and just seeing what I could build. I remember one of the first sites I built was a mock website for a fictitious band that I created. It had a like scrolling marquee tag and everything across it. And I was lucky in my high school. My high school librarian's son was a software engineer. And so I went into the high school library one day and said, "Do you have any books on like computer programming on HTML or something?" And she said, "No, but my son does." And she started bringing in books from home from him for me to read. So I taught myself HTML and JavaScript round about the sort of 2000 to 2002, just from books from my awesome librarian. And then I used it mostly to build websites for bands that I was in. I was a musician, played in various rock bands. And so I was always the one who was managing website. And so, yeah, kind of dabbled a bit with PHP and WordPress, but always felt like that was really just janky and not a very pleasant experience. So I never really took to it. And then I got a degree in music. And if you've ever had a degree in music, the one thing you learn when you come out of university is it's very tough to get a job. So I think after I left university, I I just did like fairly unpleasant minimum wage jobs for about a year, and then had an opportunity to go to Norway and work on fishing boats. And that was a very unpleasant job, but it kind of gave me the opportunity to spend a lot of time thinking about what I want to do. I really knew that I didn't want to work on fishing boats or do any more menial jobs. And so I just thought, okay, maybe I can start building something in on the internet. This is kind of one of the big .com booms. So I thought, I'm gonna teach myself how to do more web stuff and build more websites. And a good friend of mine at the time just happened to mention, said, "Hey, have you checked out this thing called Ruby on Rails?" Nope. Tell me about it. So I think he sent me a link to DHH's blog in 15 minutes or whatever that talk was. And I thought, wow, okay, this is exactly what I want to be doing right now. So I got myself a book. Unfortunately, all I had was a Ruby on Rails 1 tutorial book, and I was working with the Ruby on Rails 2 gem. So I built my first site with a sort of poorly fitting tutorial book, trying to make sense and trying to work out why everything is going wrong. And my entire learning process was self-guided and just bashing my head on errors and bumping into things. It was quite a difficult process, but I enjoyed it. I persevered, and it was kind of like, I don't know, in the Batman movie, the Christian Bale one, where he goes into the mountains and he has that sort of training montage where he's getting beaten up in the snow and stuff like that. Well, this was my training montage. It wasn't quite as glamorous as the Himalayas, but I was in the fjords of Norway. The days that I had off, I would just lock myself away and study and code. And I think so. I started doing freelancing and contracting in Ruby on Rails from that. But I think what really, really hooked me was 2010. A book came out called Metaprogramming Ruby by Paolo Perota, and that book is excellent. So, like, free plug to Paolo. If you ever wanted a really, really, really good Ruby book to see just what a programming language is capable of, just playing around with all of the like capabilities of Ruby, it blew me away. So yeah, I started working as a contractor from 2008, and I've been working in Ruby or in code in some respect since then. I think, oh, why Ruby and why not other things? I mentioned PHP. Like I felt like PHP sucked. I felt like the Rails environment already had everything that I needed without me trying to work it out in PHP. And JavaScript at the time, like Ajax was still fairly limited and fairly clunky. Everything sort of browser related, you had lots of workarounds and it just wasn't pleasant. Ruby on Rails was the first time I thought this just sits nicely. You know, you've got this balance between frustration and boredom, where if something is too uninteresting, then you lose interest, right? You become bored. If it's too frustrated, if it's too difficult, then you become frustrated. But just in the middle of there, you've got this like sweet spot for flow. And I felt that when I started writing in Ruby, I would enter that flow state. And having been a musician, like flow is a really weird thing, and I don't think everybody has experienced it. I think a lot of people have, but being a musician, and especially I was a jazz musician for a long time, like jazz is a sort of music that really lends itself to flow, where you can just completely lose yourself in this creative process, and you almost become a spectator of your own sort of creative process. And I felt like I got that when I wrote in Ruby.
It's funny.
And so
I didn't know you had 14 fingers.
that's
It's a that's a being a jazz musician is a wild gig.
I was a jazz bassist, so really all you have to have is a rubber neck.
That's hilarious. My son's a bassist. Just for the folks in the chat, I figured out what the audio issue is, and then I apologize. I'll set this thing up later. But for now, I'll manage it manually. You mentioned that that you came to Ruby and PHP sort of already existed,
Yeah.
and PHP seemed kind of clunky and shit. And I want to jump in here a little bit because I definitely refuse to do work in PHP these days. Occasionally, excuse me, but if you go back to like PHP 3 days and even earlier, PHP was revolutionary for what it allowed you to do. Right, it allowed you to execute an entire. You would give it an HTML template that executed code in it and shipped the executed output to the user, and that was fucking amazing. But there were no abstractions. So
Exactly.
when you wanted to show a list of things in your database, you would say, "Hey, we, select star from list of things, and put it here," and that was cool. But what happened in the early 2000s was people started saying, well, wait a minute, if we can just ship precompiled HTML to the server, that opens up a whole new category of web applications. And we got Java and what did the Rails things call it early in the Rails days? XML sit-ups. And you would do XML sit-ups to configure your Java application. You would get it online, and you get it responding to requests, and it was a lot of work to just get it to do fucking hello world. And Rails really changed that for all of us. And I do absolutely love Rails for that. But I let's not go too far down the Rails road. So PHP is an early one. Carry on. Go on.
I wanted to add something here, if you like, also coming from PHP. What I did some, I agree with you that it was kind of. I remember I discovered it from a CD. It was in Romania. We had maybe it was internationally this cheap, or I don't know how it's called, kind of magazine. And I just bought at one point this magazine with a CD or diskette. I don't remember, but one of these. And I discovered PHP, and it was amazing that For that, I'm not sure if it was the time that where we had Java applets or not, or something like this. Anyhow, it was hard to make something that is interactive in a way with the user in the browser. That like a now we call it web app, but for me it was a lot of work. And I what the, PHP was truly amazing, and I implemented back then a couple of applications for different friends, almost for free, all of them, because I was just happy to do it. Where it was the setup was like they were running a server on their Windows machine and doing in browser things we did because I felt that Borland Delphi was a bit too restraining for what it can do. And also I had always something to run the executable out of it in some other people's computer. But what I was always doing for each project was I kind of invented, feeling that I was inventing what I know we call web framework, always thinking, okay, there is a URL, I parse something on it, I do it, I put it to a function, I think, and I always had the setup of how to load files from the directory, and I always started from scratch. And this is, for example, one of the things that for me was clicking with the Rails, that everything, or in general, most of the things were having a place to go.
Yeah.
Back to you.
No, I think definitely. I mean, PHP lacked, for me, it lacked clear encapsulation, and it lacked clear conventions about encapsulation. And I think one of the best things that Rails sort of gave people was convention. I think Rails could probably go further on the convention thing though, because a lot of people don't necessarily learn how to be strict with like a layered architecture or something. So I think the Rails conventions are great, but I don't know, maybe we could open up that thread later. I know that Stephen and I, the main thing we bond over is complaining about the youngins today.
Oh,
You said,
that's
Steve,
absolutely true.
you have you noted a subject that you wanted to address earlier.
Why you love Ruby?
It was the while we love Ruby, or
Yeah, it's why do we love Ruby over all of the other things we could be doing? But I think that might be a little bit further down the line. I do want to address a couple of things. I did not know, and I'm sorry, Gavin. I may have called you Graham on this stream.
No, I don't think you
Because
did. I didn't pick up on it.
Oh, okay. It's possible. It's possible because I used to stream with my buddy Graham on 2 streams, and Gavin and Graham are pretty close for a dumb Canadian. So anyway, so I apologize for that, but it's there are I don't like when people hate on technologies unnecessarily rather. I think that some technologies are completely fucking stupid. Electron is the complete fucking bane of everyone's existence, and it results in a lower quality of user experience. And I want to rid the world of Electron, but in general, I don't like shitting on things that people have created, especially individuals. When a company creates something, fuck them. That's for the, what do the capitalists say? That's for the free market to sort out, right? Like, when when Elon builds a bunch of cars that catch fire, fuck them. Don't care.
Isn't it someone else's creative work as well? Like,
you sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, if I just to play devil's advocate, if I worked for a company and was hired to build a thing, it's still my creative work. Um, the fact that somebody else is paying me to do it doesn't take away from the fact that it's a person putting their mind to solving a problem.
Oh,
Why do you draw that
dude.
distinction?
Oh, buddy. We are getting into a territory that deeply affected my early entrees into the non-independent software developer world. But I also agree with that. That like that the thing that you create, you know, who has the ownership for it necessarily. So there's a whole bunch of that going on. I do want to catch up on some of the chat. So I'm just going to interrupt slightly. Rockadanescu, I apologize. If I'm pronouncing these things badly. I'm from fucking Nova Scotia. In Nova Scotia, we say, you know, Canada has 2 official languages and Cape Bretoners don't speak either one. And I so apologize, but also I'm a Canadian who now lives in Sweden, so I don't know how fucking anything is pronounced anymore. So Rocketanescu says, I actually started Ruby because a Pearl monk told me I'll probably love it. Switch from .NET to Ruby over the summer. I love that. I love that. I love when people come from another language because I've shipped absolutely shitloads of software on .NET in C# and whatever the fuck. And in Ruby, I just feel like the chains are removed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like there's a ceiling in place. I just feel like the whole world is open to me, and that's what I love so much about Ruby. And actually, I'll make a note, and we can talk about Xavier Nora. I'm sure I'm butchering his name desperately. Great dude. He created the Zeitwerk framework, and among other things, is a Rails core contributor. And he had a really great explanation in Poland a couple of weeks ago at the Ruby conference that I was speaking at Poland about in Ruby we don't have keywords really. We have a couple, like we have class and module and def and do
I don't think.
and if and unless and else. And I actually don't know. So here's a weird thing because I have to look this up every time. And I've only done it maybe 5 times in my entire Ruby career. Oh, this is great content. How do you make an else if in Ruby?
You mean how do you define it behind the scenes, or
So
how
if you do if foo, do this thing, end. Or let's say you have if blah else blah. How do you put an else if in there? In Ruby.
It's a special word.
Yeah,
right?
it fucking
It's
is.
else if.
It's
I don't remember the history. I think I read somewhere a question about why does it not have the E, if I remember correctly. I don't use it, but I think it is. And I don't remember the answer, but I remember that I read about someone was asking why is written like that. What's the purpose of that? But I don't remember the answer.
So it is. This is one of my complaints about Ruby. It is, and I keep learning this for the first time every fucking time I do it. It's ELSIF.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now
it's missing an AE.
But why?
And also it's
but
stuck
why?
together.
But why? Because the way C does this, is there's if and there's else, and else can take a block or an expression. And so in C, you write if, blah, whatever, and then else. And then if you want an if, you write else if, blah, because that's an expression. And those things are true in Ruby. And I can't tell you how many times. And I mean, you know, not to, you know, stroke my own cock, but I'm kind of one of the foremost experts in Ruby in the world. And I don't know how to write else if in Ruby because I never fucking do it. Because Ruby's so expressive in other ways, right? Like it's absolutely amazing. And so there are so in Ruby we have so few keywords, and the thing that Xavi pointed out in his talk is that a class name or anything that begins with a capital letter is a constant in Ruby. Okay, fair enough. And I love that. That's a convention thing. And I love it. But it means, what does that mean? That means that this is a constant and you can redefine a constant. Holy shit, that opens up some shit. Especially in testing and in modularity and so on. And so there's just some amazing shit that you can do in Ruby that you can't do in other languages just because it's not so expressive. And you can't really do, I mean, small talk competes, but nobody gets paid to write small talk.
Yeah.
If anybody out there wants to pay me to write small talk, by the way, please. Like,
I
I'm
would
here.
say though, if you're a Rubyist and you want to up your Ruby game, try a bit of small talk just for fun. I never worked with small talk in any sort of professional sense, but I picked it up because all the people that I respect in the Ruby space came from small talk, and I thought there must be something to this. And small talk will rewire your brain. Like if you can learn to write expressive small talk, then when you come back to Ruby, all the furniture's in a different place. You just everything feels different.
Absolutely. This is a I'm sorry, if people can comment in the chat, I'm switching my microphone on and off to adjust for the echo that I haven't really adjusted for. So if you're getting like a pop when I turn my microphone on, please let me know because I'm trying to do this. Oh, there's some discussion about why. I'm just going to make a note here because we need to talk about why. Because he's fucking awesome. I was going to say he was fucking awesome. He is still awesome. He's just, who knows where he is. Actually, I know where he is. But we know who and where Y is. He created some fucking amazing content. So we one of the things that we talked about, we sort of touched on. I have learning Ruby as a first language and Mina Swan and the Ruby and how the Ruby community is lovely as notes here. I don't know which direction we want to go in, and so I'm going to go with the first one, learning Ruby as a first language. I think, I'm going to start this one, I think Ruby is an excellent first language. I think Ruby is an amazing first language because of how expressive it can be. I'm going to play devil's advocate slightly and say that I hate Ruby as a first language because of how expressive it can be. When you go bowling for the first time, and I'm not sure bowling is, I mean, we did go bowling as the after party at the Ruby conference in Poland a couple weekends ago. We went bowling as the after party, and that was actually pretty fucking great. But that's American bowling. In Canada, there are three that I know of. There are three different types of bowling games that you can play. You can play 10-pin bowling, which is the American one. That's where there's a ball with 3 holes in it for your fingers. And there's 10 pins, and you get 3 shots, and so on. In Canada, we play 5-pin bowling, where you get a ball that's big enough to fit in the palm of your hand, if you have a big hand. And there are 5 pins. And then there's also, if you're from the northeastern U.S. or Nova Scotia or PEI, where I'm from, we also have duck pin bowling, which is 10 pin, and the pins are almost cylindrical, but they're a little bit fat in the middle, but they don't clear out between shots. And so it becomes a strategic thing to use the laying down pins to knock down other pins. And so there's at least three different types of bowling that I'm aware of. And I don't know which of those, which of those are right for a new bowler, right? And in the same way, I'm not sure if Ruby, and when you're bowling, you get like the gutters, right? So that like you can put up these stoppers on the side or put a big air-filled bag in the gutter to make sure that your ball doesn't go in the gutter for people who suck at bowling.
The ramp to roll the ball down as well.
Right. Or the ramp is for children, by the way, or handicapped people. Or I don't know what you're supposed to say these days, differently abled people. And so, you get like all these things, but Ruby doesn't really have the guardrails. It just sort of says, "Hey, whatever you want to do, go nuts." And Lucian, I suspect you want to speak.
Yeah. So I agree with you. But let me add a bit of context here about what I meant, or what it could mean to learn programming. I work with, like, this is just from my personal experience, but I'm not a teacher. I'm a trainer. I delivered workshops both for Ruby and testing and some other stuff. I did the forming as a non-formal education. I don't know how to call it, but I'm not a teacher a formal teacher, let's say. But I work with a lot of people in a lot of contexts. And here is my experience trying to get some people to switch their career from non-programming, non-IT to programming. And I think there are two categories of skills, but one where I think Ruby is fitting is there is a kind of switch that is happening between I can talk some words and I can transform them into something that the computer will do. I know this sounds very, very strange in a way, but the modeling what I want into something that is run. And in here, I think Ruby is very fit. When we go into, okay, now let's talk about the class and objects and interfaces and I don't know, stuff. Okay, Ruby lets you do a lot of stuff in a lot of ways, which it's amazing, right? But yeah, there maybe you need some guardrails. But for me, I mean, for example, I was the last, I don't know, at one point worked with someone that wanted to learn programming. They chose HTML and JavaScript as the thing that they want to go into IT with. And I did not want to impose Ruby or anything, right? I said, okay, I will not try to say, okay, go my way. But I don't know if maybe we here, if we're working on web, we imagine these things simple, but when you get someone that is outside IT and you say, okay, now let's put up a web page in a browser and now let's talk about DOM and elements and stuff and what they are and how they are rendered. And now you want to run something interactive and so on. I found that a lot for someone to, I'm not saying, and I agree with you, this is another asterisk that I want to put that, yeah, I don't like at all when people say I hate this or that. I will go on the tangent a bit on that in a few seconds. But yeah, so, and I found out that when I said to that person, here's the thing, what if we want to make a simple calculator or something, right? And you just want to add some numbers and stuff, right? So let's, how would you say that in English? And let's put it. And then I fire up interactive Ruby, the IRB, and we just played with that there. Mm-hmm. And I found it amazing to write some things there and say, okay, this is how you print stuff. If you want to display something, you put puts or whatever. And it made a switch in this modeling stuff. That's one thing. Just let me say a bit about the tangent because it's, I'm not sure when I go back on this, but it's something that is disturb me a lot, and it's in a way in contrabalance with loving Ruby. Is when I enter in some websites where people are sharing Ruby knowledge, or I don't know, articles, or Reddit or Hacker News, or I will mention some sources, right? And I'm always, I don't want to say anything about, because maybe people are feeling like that, but I always find very strange the following quote: "I hate Ruby," and I found it, how, I mean, it's, how can you hate the language? And even if you do, why would you come here to write it? It's like, I'm not judging, but it's just a thing for me. Like, I never went to any language, and I don't recommend to anyone go and say something bad about any language, even if you don't like it. That's my stand, because it might be useful in some context, or there are people who are really loving it, or, but just expressing this, I don't know, I found it a bit too much. Okay, but sorry, that was just something that I wanted to add before when you said something. Yeah, so I think Ruby is fit for a first language to learn something that maybe, again, I'm not trained, maybe people are calling it computational thinking, or I don't know, the ability to take something from the real world, or I don't know, read the requirement or a problem, and then be able to transform it like a mathematical function, right? You put it in something and you transform it into a set of things that will run. And I think here Ruby fits. That's my stand.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. We have a couple of things from the chat that I'm trying to keep up
Yeah,
with.
let's add it there.
And Rocket Anescu says Ruby is awesome because you can guide the student to learn the cool stuff first. And it's just like Lucian said, you just write words and it feels so easy, which is something that I learned from Rich Kilmer, who weirdly is not super popular or active in the Ruby community these days, but he really is one of the sort of barn burners on this. I want to say that Rich Kilmer gave a talk about DSLs. No, I'm going to say it. Rich Kilmer gave a talk about DSLs at a conference in San Diego that I was invited to. And at the same conference, Chad Fowler was there, who people in the Ruby community who know who Chad Fowler was or is. Chad Fowler is a jazz musician now. He is not a Ruby programmer, motherfucker. Gavin, we are going to have so many conversations about music and the because I'm learning how to play guitar and how to write my own music in the last year or two. And because I kind of aspire to a folk music career after I stopped typing keywords into computers for a living. And Chad gave a talk where he said, I gave a talk where I said, hey, if RSpec gives you nothing else, RSpec will give you never wondering which order the parameters to assert go. And 25 years in, I still don't know if expected or actual comes first. And it doesn't matter which language, it doesn't matter what. And I don't use RSpec. I use Minitest.
Yeah.
I don't use RSpec unless it's already entrenched. But and Chad Fowler said to me one day, he gave a talk and then he came back to me afterwards and he showed me his laptop and he said, Stephen, I thought that your claim about mixing up expected and actual was kind of bullshit. And then I realized after you gave your talk, I realized that I had done it 3 times in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
and so, I mean, you know, and I don't use RSpec. I do not promote it. I don't think you should use RSpec. In fact, I think you should not use RSpec is my opinion. And yes, I created RSpec and it was a teaching tool. And if you're not a fucking child, you should not be using RSpec anymore. But whatever. We can do another episode of this podcast or whatever the fuck this is, this stream. We can do another episode of the stream on why the fuck whatever. Anyways,
The answer
so-
is expected, by the way.
what's that?
So if you've ever had a PR reviewed by me, then you probably had a comment saying you've expected and actual the wrong way around. It's expected first for most of the mini test assertions.
It is usually in mini test. It's always expected first. But I don't always write in Ruby. I write in other languages, and in other languages is not always consistent, and it's not always consistent within the language, because Ruby is so expressive. You can put a block on the left side, you can put a block on the right side, you can put a string on the left side, you can put a string on the right side, you can put an object on the left side. Well, actually, no. It's not that complicated. You can put an object on the left side, which may be a proc, and you can put an object on the right side. And in Ruby, yes, the expected always comes first. Thank you for the reminder. In non-Ruby, that is not always true, and it is not always consistent within the framework because of the way language syntaxes work. And this is one of the beautiful things about Ruby. Now, I do like stabby procs. They look a little better. But actually, I'm gonna call back to something I commented on earlier. I think when Lucian said that Ruby 1.8 was the local language when he started, that was the I said that was the perfect version of Ruby. I absolutely 100% think that Ruby 1.8 was the perfect version of the language. I think the new hash syntax is stupid. I think the new hash syntax is not only stupid, but I think it's reductive.
You can't say something like that without clarifying it.
I think so. Okay, so the main difference between new hash syntax and old hash syntax, and for those of you who don't know, old hash syntax is curly braces with an object on the left and then an equal sign greater than, which we call the hash rocket, and then another object. So you have key value where the key is an object and the object is and the value is also an object. Okay, perfect. And the new hash syntax is a keyword where the key must be a symbol and the value is an object. And I think that can go fuck itself.
Yeah, I see people get picked up on this because they'll try to do an integer as the key or something like that, and they get a syntax error.
Exactly, and that's the problem. In the old hash syntax, anything can go on the left, anything can go on the right. We're fucking good. The new hash syntax is just to appease the JavaScript kids and fuck those guys. And I do not like the new syntax. I use it when my IDE tells me to. I use RubyMine. When RubyMine says convert this to the new hash syntax, I do it, and a little part of my soul dies every time. Now, I'm not the only one, because I was on a panel at Yuruko, which I don't think the video has been released for. And I don't even know the video will represent it appropriately because Mats was like beamed in on a shitty internet connection. It wasn't really good. But after the talk, I mentioned that I fucking hated the new hash syntax. And the new hash syntax can go fuck itself. And so Ruby 1.8 was perfect. And as I was explaining my complaints about this, Mats is on the big screen in the wall and also being streamed to the world, like nodding along. And the key element here is when you show a hash in IRB, no matter what format you give it, it shows it to you in old syntax. Old syntax. I want to rename old, and because this is Ruby, we can just say, correct equals old. The correct syntax is the old syntax, and the new syntax can go fuck itself because it came from JavaScript people and they can go fuck themselves. So, I hate that shit.
I spent about an hour trying to debug a problem of my own creation, and I think it kind of speaks to the hash issue in Ruby and also why Ruby is great. So Ruby is great because everything is an object, right?
Yes.
Like there's no such thing as like a native type that is kept behind the curtain from you. It's everything is an equal citizen in the Ruby space, and you can do like sort of equally everything with every thing, and that just makes it so cool, so extensible, and so powerful. And that's also why a Ruby hash is able to have any kind of object as its key. You're not limited to a string or a symbol. You can use anything as the hash key. And so I think now that you've made me think about it, it's actually nicer to have the hash rocket syntax because that makes it clear that it's an object pointing to an object key and an object value. Whereas you don't get that if the assumption is this is always a symbol. And maybe that distinction is lost for people who only use the newer notation. The bug that I came across or that I created for myself, I created a value object that was a string that subclassed simple delegate or the delegate class, sorry. So basically I wanted a string that had a semantic meaning to me in my code, but was basically just a string. And I was passing this in as the key to a hash and then trying to access the hash later using an actual string. So it was a comparison of string with this value versus my an instance of my custom class, which had the same string value, but they weren't the same in the hash. So I was getting nil returned from the hash. And I would look into the hash and I would see that the thing is there, it's looking at me. And then I would pass in a string for the key and nothing would come back. And that took me about an hour to actually work out what I'd done to myself. But I think, yeah, the lesson there, other than be careful about, using delegate class, just everything in Ruby is an object. And I think that's one of the really beautiful, elegant, and powerful things about the language.
Everything being an object is the thing that got me into Ruby.
Yeah.
That was the one thing. Okay, I'm not sure. How are you guys doing for time? We're at 10 p.m. now. How are you guys doing for time?
I'm okay. I think Lucian's probably the person.
Lucian, how's your time looking?
I can stay. I can stay.
Have you got another 30 to 60 minutes?
30 minutes, yes.
30 minutes? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Can I suggest that we take a 30-second break because I need to piss like a motherfucker. And then we can come back and I'll load the loading screen. It'll be a black screen for a few minutes for those of you that are watching in the chat. And I'd like to run away for 30 seconds, have a quick break. Everyone else can too, and we'll go for another 30 minutes. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, we are back.
Okay,
All right.
super.
No, sorry, I forgot to switch the scene. You guys,
No problem.
yeah, we totally. I totally should show you what the setup looks like over here, so that you guys can have some fucking insight. Yeah, we don't have any artwork or anything.
No
'cause
problem. There is
yeah.
no need to
No.
actually do that.
We're
but
just we're just hanging out online here. So Rocket Inescu wants to know what I think of required keyword arguments. We're gonna make a note about that one.
Yeah, we should start writing these down.
yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, so
But
required keyword arguments. Okay, so I got some notes here from the chat. So Ruby as a first language. Let's talk about Ruby as a first language. Is Ruby a good first language? I think we sort of covered that a little bit. I think that Ruby is I think that my sort of summary is that Ruby is a good and a terrible, is possibly the best and worst first language.
I think that's the best spot to be.
It's
You don't want to be average.
right.
You want to be the best
No.
or the end
Absolutely
or the
no.
worst, right?
That
It's
that
like-
middle zone, Kathy Sierra taught us.
It's a yeah.
That's
it's
the
a lot
zone of mediocrity.
competition.
That's the zone of mediocrity. So Ruby is the best first language because it's the language that I've found next to Smalltalk that lets you convert your thoughts into executable code in the most effective way. And that's when I talked about about Rich Kilmer and this talk that he gave in, where was it? I don't fucking remember where it was. I used to travel a lot to go to a lot of Ruby conferences. And so he basically gave a talk about DSLs where he was sitting with a customer. We would call it a product owner under Scrum terms, but Scrum can go fuck itself. That's a topic for a future stream.
I'll write that one down.
Scrum can go fuck itself. But Rich Kilmer talked about how he wrote out like the script of how the actions a system would take. And the customer said to him, "Well, what are those parentheses?" "Oh, don't worry about those. That's just for the computer." Okay, cool. And he built an entire DSL, and then when the customer was happy with the DSL and the way it looked, he just went and implemented the DSL and made it work. And that was actually, that talk and that explanation was the inception of the current RSpec DSL that people know today if they use RSpec, which they shouldn't, because RSpec is bloated and it has too much magic in it. And I also, oh fuck, I want to talk about magic. I feel like magic is an entire fucking episode.
Yes,
Because I had a
that
conversation about
episode.
this. Okay, so somebody make a note. One of you two make a note. Magic is an episode because I have strong opinions on magic. Fuck it, I'm gonna tell the story. Today, I was pairing with a guy who's a new programmer, never programmed anything, and is shipping a Ruby on Rails app, which is actually valuable. Like the app he has value. People will pay for it, and
Nice.
without bearing the lead or without betraying confidences too much, his app has enough potential that he got government grants to extend the app. And he is not a programmer. He's just a dude who learned some Ruby to solve a problem. And so we were rendering some partials today. and the controller name didn't line up with the name of the model, which didn't line up with the name of the thing in the partial. And so we had to write out render partial blah with collection this as that. And it was really long. And I said to him, well, we refactored the app a little bit. That one line of code with a whole bunch of arguments would just be render at blah. Right? That's not magic. That's just how render works in Rails. And all you have to do is read the fucking documentation. And so when most people are talking about, ooh, the magic of Ruby, like, ooh, belongs to is magic. No, it's not magic. It's a fucking class method that you fucking called and you chose to. Like, it's not magic. It's behaving exactly as it is documented. Fuck this. Okay, no, I'm sorry. That's a future. Ruby Magic is a future episode. I apologize.
I wrote it down here.
No,
worries.
thank you. I
Ruby
apologize.
as the first language.
Summarize. Ruby is a first language.
Ruby,
So I think Ruby as a first language is great
we
because
checked it, yes.
you can write what you can do what I mean, right? DWIM, DWIM, right? Do what I mean. Do what I mean just works so much better in Ruby than it does in other places. It reads so much like English.
The flip side to that, though, is I think that Ruby's an excellent language for first people to learn because the barrier to learning it is so low, but it's a terrible step up to your second language because the barrier to learning Ruby is so low, right? If you learn Ruby and become proficient with Ruby, you're not going to go away and immediately be fluent in Java. You got a lot more to learn.
That is, holy shit. Okay, this is why we're here. That is a take that I have never heard before that I love. Ruby is an excellent first language and a terrible second language. And it blows my mind because the worst Ruby code bases I have worked on in my life, and keep in mind, this is not me sniffing my own farts. This is just me, stating facts. I'm the dude you call when your shit is bad. Okay? I'm the dude you call when your company is about to be bankrupt because they can't fix some shit. And the worst Ruby code I have ever seen in my life is from newbie programmers like 1 to 5 years who've only experienced Java or C# and they come to Ruby. And that might be a static versus dynamic thing. Please, somebody make a note. Maybe Lucian, because you're making notes. Static versus dynamic is another excellent future topic.
Dynamically typed, I will write here.
Yes. Yes.
No, I'm joking. Okay, static versus dynamic. No,
motherfucker, I could talk.
Don't go into that. Don't go into that. I noted it. I wrote it down.
I can opine for an hour by myself about static versus dynamic.
We will do an episode where first you start, you talk for an hour about this, and then we jump in. Right? We'll just be here to cheer or do something, right?
This is, well, you know what? This is, this is the first stream on this on this stream. I keep saying podcast. I've never done a podcast in my life. This is the first stream I've ever done. But the funny thing is, when Graham Lee and I did the Amiga podcast, it turned into a 2 hour special where we'd spend the first hour talking about whatever the fuck we wanted, which was often left-leaning politics and Marxism and how much the world is fucked up because of a lack of understanding of Marxism. And then we would spend the second hour writing Amiga software. Yeah. So sorry. So these things, yeah, I mean, these things definitely happen. So there's definitely, so Ruby as a first language, I think, is fantastic. And Gavin, I have never heard that Ruby as a second language is terrible, and I want to explore that more because it intrigues me and blows my mind a little bit. And and
So
and Ruby
people,
wasn't my second language. Ruby was like my eighth language. And so
it's
I never experienced this.
there's 2 points, I think, and they're both two sides of the same coin. There's the Ruby sucks as a first language because it doesn't prepare you well for learning a more complicated language like Java. And then there's the Ruby sucks as a second language because if you have come from like a Java world, then you're going to put all sorts of bad code into your Ruby app. Um, no, I've definitely experienced myself like apps that have been built by um, people whose first language is obviously Java, and they're not free to think in the same way that you are as a Rubyist. Um,
Yeah.
even so,
Yeah.
like I did a lot of stuff in Objective C, and Objective C is um, nominally a object-oriented language, but you're writing a mixture of procedural code and object oriented. There's like classes scattered around there, but you don't really embrace the full spirit of object oriented programming languages when you write in Objective C. And I feel like that same um, half-assed approach, like that half commitment to objective oriented programming, is what people bring to Ruby when it's not their first language. Like when I think in Ruby, I think in as everything as an object, to the point where I upset people because they're like, well, why didn't you just make this a string? And it's because it's not a string, it's a you know SKU number or something. So let's make a class called SKU and um, that sort of thing. So I'm like very much indoctrinated in domain driven design, and I like my code to be expressive of the thing that I'm modeling. And so I I have an object for everything. And that's the sort of thing that I feel that if you have come to Ruby from a language where you're really writing more in this mixture of classes and native types and data structures, it's missing from the code. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I'm super interested in your comparison to Objective C because my personal experience with Objective C is that Objective C is the language I wanted for my operating system. And so okay, so back to basics. I consider Smalltalk and Lisp to be perfect, and I consider Self to be tangentially perfect.
Don't know it.
So Self is Smalltalk with the classes removed.
Okay.
So so picture Smalltalk or whatever you have in your brain as Smalltalk, which is everything is an object and every object is an instance of a class. Okay. Now, Self is Smalltalk with the classes removed. Everything is an object and there's no reference to classes. And so when you create a thing in an object-oriented language that doesn't have classes, like Self or IO, and I don't think there are any others. I suppose you could categorize Newton script into this land, but I may be the only person of the three of us who have ever written software for the Newton message pad.
A safe bet.
But Newton script was more lispy than Smalltalky. So you when you remove the class from object-oriented programming, Now you have prototypes, which are, this is the shape this object has. And I want one like this, but with this extra field. We're going to duplicate this previous one, and we're going to add this field to it.
Mhm.
And that's what JavaScript is. And this is why I don't hate JavaScript as a language. I love JavaScript as a language. I think JavaScript is a fantastic language. I hate JavaScript people in the JavaScript community. But I love JavaScript as a language. I think it's fantastic. And so, but Objective-C is an object-oriented language. The problem, from my perspective, with Objective-C is the C. Right? So Objective-C code is in the original implementation. This is not true in modern implementations, but in the original implementation, the way that Objective-C code was compiled was you would pre-process the Objective-C code, and wherever it found square brackets, it would do obj-C message send class, object whatever, right? And it would just transpile that into C. And that's totally fine for the computers of the time, 1985, 1987, right? Totally fine for the computers of the time. Objective-C, modern Objective-C, I think is when I say Ruby is so I often say that Ruby is my favorite language that I can get paid to write software in. Objective-C would be my second favorite language that I can get paid to write software in. And the reason is because all of those dynamic, the whole world is open to you type things are available in Objective-C. But I think the people who learned Objective-C came from another. Nobody learns Objective-C as their first language. Right? And this is one of the things that I'm looking for from this stream, is sort of a mind-blowing opportunity. A mind-blowing opportunity to me is this idea that Ruby is a great first language but not a great second language. That's completely mind-blowing to me. I totally agree with it, because Ruby is that, Ruby. Okay, let me get a little bit. So actually I want to get into this a little bit, but I'm a Canadian. I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm a blue noser. I'm from the east coast of Canada. I lived all over Canada for various reasons. And then I moved to Sweden in 2015. And there is a whole there's a in Canada, I can go, and unfortunately I wish I was a little bit high for this stream for this reason, because I can explain a little bit better when I'm a bit high. But I live in Sweden, and being high is illegal because everything fun in Sweden is illegal. When you want to smoke dope, okay? Now how okay? Let's out ourselves. I'm 40 years old. Gavin, how old are you?
I'm 37.
37. Okay, Lucian, how old are you?
41.
41. All right, awesome.
They
Okay.
call you graybeard from now on. Then.
Oh fuck! Fuck yeah! I don't have to be the oldest guy in the fucking stream for once. All right. Okay. Actually, I don't think I was the oldest guy in the stream for the last time either. But either way, I'm so happy when I'm not the oldest person in the room. My favorite dude in the world is my neighbor Torsten, and he doesn't he uses Facebook and he uses WhatsApp. Motherfucker will never see the stream. He lives like 700 meters that way. He's 86 years old, and he is the funniest motherfucker I ever met in my life. Anyways, okay. So, I love hanging out with him. because he's just old as fuck, and he finds it amusing how young I am. And among my peers, I'm one of the old codgers, which is amusing to me because I'm the old codger in my professional career, but in my personal life, I'm actually the youngest person. Which creates some interesting. So anyways, I don't remember where we were. Let me grab the thread. Oh yeah. So like when we have a new language, or when we have a new idea, it really helps to sort of, nuke and pave your previous understandings of the world, right? And when you experience Ruby as your first language, that's an amazing thing. But when you experience any other language as your first language, is super restricted and bounded and so on, and then you move to Ruby and you're like, hey, fucking anything goes, right? It's like, okay, so when I go to Canada, I walk in, the first thing I do, I land in Canada, I go to the airport, right? I go through border control and I say, hey bud, I'm Canadian. Thank you for letting me in, motherfucker. And then and then when I leave the airport, the first place I go is the weed store, because marijuana is legal in Canada. You buy it at the liquor store in Canada. And then I go to the weed store and I tell them exactly what I'm looking for. And the cool thing about weed in Canada, which neither one of you will have any experience with, but I strongly suggest you do. You go to the liquor store or the weed store. It depends on province in Canada, because Canada is, I'm not sure if you know this, but Canada's like this big, right? Sweden is like this big, but Canada is like this big. Okay. So you go to the liquor store and you walk into the weed closet and you say, hey, I want some weed that will, make me super focused and not want to fall asleep and a little bit, skeptical of the government, and they will give you a pack of joints that do all of that. And you smoke your joint and you're like, fuck yeah, it does exactly what was said on the package, right? Now, when you live in Sweden, where marijuana and cannabis is illegal, and by the way, I'm just saying this because people have told me, because I've lived in Sweden for 10 years almost, right? I have no experience of this, by the way, right? But when you get like weed in Sweden, and so when you go to Canada and you buy a box of joints and you smoke a joint, that gives you a high that is exactly the same as every other high you ever had, right? On that kind of weed. And when you're in Sweden or a country where weed is not legal and you happen to find yourself, accidentally consuming some marijuana products in a country where it's not legal, well, the quality is not going to be so great. And so sometimes you might get like super paranoid. And the super paranoid weed sucks, by the way. Or you might find some weed that makes you like super sleepy or whatever, but you just take it because you're just looking to get high, right? There's a difference. There's marijuana. There are cannabis users who are looking to get high, and there are cannabis users who are looking to solve a problem. And and in programming languages we have the same thing, right? And for me, Ruby is one of those languages where you're just looking to get high. It's just everything is open, man. Everything is fine. And I promise I haven't even smoked any cannabis in like a day and a half at this point. I have stamps on my passport to prove it because I have to show the police. So, but Ruby like opens your world, right? We talk a lot, or as an industry, we talk a lot about how a lot of Steve Jobs' visionary bullshit came from him doing LSD, right? But that's the thing. When I was growing up, my dad, who was a huge pothead, and I didn't know this until cannabis was legal in Canada, but my dad was a huge pothead because I didn't know that my dad was a huge pothead when I was 25 because my dad hid it from me for all of my childhood years. And all I knew about my father was that he quit drinking just before I was born. Like the month before I was born, my father quit drinking because he was an alcoholic. But he continued smoking dope, and I didn't know that until I was about 25. And we wound up having lunch together, and he smoked a doobie, and I shared it with him. And I was like, what the fuck? You know, I thought you gave all this shit up. And he said, no, I don't have a problem with weed. I have a problem with alcohol. And so that was my dad's thing. And so we ended up, you know, that was like, there's a guardrails, right? Like when like I would never, I'll smoke weed fucking anywhere. Okay. But I won't do cocaine anywhere because I don't know what it's been mixed with. Because my father, growing up, taught me, you don't know what they're mixing with shit. My father even taught me this about weed, but I didn't realize he was coming from like an expert opinion. When I was in high school, my father was like, hey, you got to be a little bit more careful of the weed. And I said, why? And he said, because you don't know what they're putting in it. And I'm like, Dad, it's fine. And he goes, yeah, but you don't know what they're putting in the weed. They could be putting some extra shit in there. And I'm like, that sounds like it makes it more fun. And he said, no, you don't know how that's going to fuck you up in the long term. So you need to, if you're going to smoke weed, you need to make sure that you know from which plants it comes from. And if you're going to do, and my father even said to me, he said, look, I'm not, my father had never done cocaine as far as I know. But when I was in my early 20s, my father told me, look, if you're going to do cocaine, I need you to be able to trace it back to where it came from, or don't do it.
Which is another way of saying don't do it, right?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, Canada's a multicultural society. We can very well process all of our cocaine back to the place where it came from in Colombia. Not much of a problem. And I've never done cocaine. I will never do anything other. I mean, I do weed and mushrooms, and that's it. And on a future stream, I will definitely do some mushrooms before we do this stream.
But that's a YouTube strike, right?
That sounds like a reasonable place. Actually, I think all three of us should do mushrooms and do the stream at one point. But my father was like, hey, like, you got to be careful about where this shit comes from. And that influenced a lot of my opinions about modern software. Like 30 years later. My father telling me about drugs and stuff. And when I look at Ruby and Rails projects, I'm like, hey, we got to be careful about where this thing comes from. Right? What is the origin of that thing? And the hash syntax is a perfect example of that. Where did the modern hash syntax come from in Ruby? It came from the fucking JavaScript kids. And they can all 100% go fuck themselves. The JavaScript kids are absolutely the bane of modern software. I'm doing this on purpose just to like lower your social cred for the other two of you, because now you're associated with me. But I do this on stream. I talk a lot of shit about JavaScript. But like, when, where do these things come from? What are they for? Right? And Ruby, the main thing that I think Ruby is for is happiness. And that's what Mats keeps talking about. Someone at Yuruko asked Mats, was Ruby designed for the web? And Mats said, no. The web wasn't really that big of a thing in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so lovely that Mats can just say, nope, here's the reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Right? That's it. Ruby wasn't designed for the web. Rails, absolutely fucking designed for the web. And we can do a whole episode. Please, Lucian, you're making notes. Please make a note. Let's do a whole episode about all of the things that Rails gets wrong.
Yeah. Oh. Just one?
Oh, Gavin, you have one. Do it. Go.
If I'm gonna throw out just one off the top of my head, it's I don't like how active record models are like a kind of God object or an object with multiple responsibilities. It's a repository, it's an input validation, it's a domain model, it's an entity, it's all these things and more. I wish it weren't, but
I would agree with that.
There's like a practical benefit to having them all in one place as well. I think conscious of time because I know that we're keeping Lucian up, but I have come to terms with the fact that Rails isn't trying to be the best or the purest architecture to suit my ideological expectations. Like Rails is its own thing and it's its own framework and its own tool, and its opinions help people to be productive. But definitely, if I could, I would split active record in two, have active repository and active model as two separate things.
No, I would agree with that strongly. I don't remember what the thing was called before active record. There was another one. The only thing that bothers me about active record, this is literally the only thing about working on large Rails code bases. Okay. When I open an active record model, I can't tell what fucking fields it has until I also look at the schema. And yeah, there are plugins to say, oh, inject a comment or do whatever. No, motherfucker, I do want that to be explicit.
Yeah.
Right? Because we could get benefits from it being explicit. Like, actually, all that strong parameters bullshit we have to do in controllers? Guess what? Probably most of that should live on the model.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Exactly. Most of that could live on the model if we had more stuff in the model rather than an empty file that fucking references schema. Anyways, holy shit. Okay, so let's unless do you guys have anything you want to add in to wrap up? I think we're probably at time because Lucian, do you have children?
Yes.
Okay.
One.
Can we do one last thing for 5 minutes? Do you have 5 minutes, Lucian?
Yes.
All right. I want to do one last thing. I do have some notes here, which I will parlay into a future talk. One from the chat, Ruby, learning Ruby without a CS degree. Motherfucker, I could talk for half an hour on that. Comfort, which small talk? Oh, I'm sorry. From the chat, which small talk? I do have to answer this one because I do know the correct answer. From the chat, which small talk should you look into? You, without knowing anything about you. Oh, data mapper. Yes. Rocket and Nescu. Thank you. Data mapper. Yes, data mapper. Let me tell which. That's what I want in Active Record. I want Active Record to let me specify every field individually and also do some transformations and whatnot. Whatever. Yes, data mapper is the thing. Data mapper is no more. Okay, so which small talk? If you want to learn small talk, I suggest personally that you go to Squeak, SQUEAK.org, squeak.org, look for the related books and stuff, and learn from Squeak. If you actually want to make a living from small talk, look at Pharo, Pharo, Pharo. Pharo has some amazing shit in it. And if I wasn't being paid to do Rails, I would be doing small talk. And Seaside specifically. Please, if you want to learn small talk, look at Squeak. Squeak first. Please. Please, please, please Squeak first. Pharo is so much fucking better, but it's also so much more complicated. And you can do everything you want to in Squeak. Please, Squeak and Pharo are where you want to learn small talk. If you want to learn Lisp, Racket is where you should do it. And also, you know, boys, if you have opinions on Lisp or small talk, please jump in. If you want to learn a thing that claims to be Lisp but is not, but is really well thought out and you can get paid to do it, learn Clojure. 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 Learn Clojure. Clojure is a Lisp that you can get paid to do. And that, I think, covers what I wanted to cover on this. The last thing I wanted to cover, I have a couple of other topics which I'll, we'll share for future. C as a first language. Fuck. Oh, I have so many opinions on C as a first language. Lucian needs to go, though. You have young children, right? You need to go do bedtime.
This is all content.
It's already bed. It's already.
Oh, is it already
in the bed.
bedtime? Fuck it!
My time.
Fuck it, hey! Oh, it's your time. Well, fuck it. This is your time.
I'm tired. No. I usually, like, here it's closing to 12, and I usually go to sleep around 9. Like my time zone.
Oh wow! Oh! So you're just letting us know that you're just fucking crazy.
We're keeping him up way past.
Yeah,
I'm
Jesus,
okay,
dude.
but I'm okay, but as you saw, I'm not contributing that much
Oh,
because
well,
I'm in
okay.
the low energy. But I want to say two things.
Please.
I want to say two things. One, I am. I think I'm making a separate opinion in a way here on the following topic. I think I'm in general I'm an early adopter, or I don't know if that is a good label to put. But I like to play with new syntax, and I'm not so against the hash, the hash syntax. What it's called, the short.
The new
No, the
wait,
the new one that is old.
The new one that sucks.
Right.
Okay. All right.
The
Please.
one that you
Oh,
you
please,
just do not
please, please defend the wrong side.
like the one with symbols, right?
Bringing
Right.
balance
Yes.
to the discussion.
Just to bring the balance, but it might be that because I encounter it without trying, like the way I learned Ruby and I would transition through it is that I did not try to bring that this is just my experience. I try to embrace something that is added as openly as possible to understand the usage. That this is how, like, okay, I'm not sure how this works, but let's try to embrace it. And for me, now when I read it, I just read it uh, in my mind. It's always I read it as a symbol. I know you can put you can even write a string with two dots and it will convert it. Or I'm not sure what it does. I'm not sure how I did that. Um,
That's an Apple. That's a
I'm not sure.
That's a Mac thing. I'll talk to you
Yeah,
about. I'll talk to you about it
and
later.
but I like it that at least when I read that, I'm pretty sure that there should be a symbol there, and this is how I read it, right? And but I do agree that when someone comes, or I don't know, even for me, sometimes it can be confusing if we switch between them, um, and yeah, they're like if you put something, if you try to do some other stuff, then does not work. But I like it in the sense that, for me at least, it simplifies, and I can say, okay, here I will only use symbols from now on, right? Like in that thing. I agree that mixing it's the baddest thing that I can do or can be done to mix to have some key symbols and some keys object or some other stuff. That I think it's the I don't like that as open as I can be. I do agree with that. Uh, that's where I draw the line of this. But I like it in this sense that I think it simplifies, and I can say, okay, in this file, or I don't know, here I'm writing symbols, and it simplifies in my mind what kind of hash that is. I'm not. Maybe it could have been better chosen this specific type of, or I don't know, idiomatic or code that we wrote. Maybe it could have had other type of symbol to specify this hash has symbols as keys, and you can work with it like that, right? Maybe it could have been something different, but in my mind, I just put it when I read it. I put it okay. The two dots of the symbol they are reversed. This is how I read it. But I agree,
That's how I do
mixing
it too.
it's a bad thing. So mixing it is a bad thing. Again, the best thing about it is that if the other developer that worked there agreed to this convention, if you start using it, you put only symbols. In my mind, I say, okay, this is a hash with symbols. Now I know what to do with it, right? Without having types. So without having types, I don't want to say it's a type thing, but
Wait,
it's an
whoa,
object
whoa,
hint,
whoa.
right?
This is another.
I will
Topic.
write it here.
There's another topic. You do have types.
Mm-hmm.
You do have types, but they are decided at runtime.
Yes, dynamically typed. It's
Yes.
super true.
There's a whole contingent of people who like to say that Ruby is untyped, and I fucking hate that shit. Dynamic typing is not untyped. It's that we're doing the type bullshit at a different time.
And also, I don't care what type it is. I just care that it responds to the message I send it.
Oh, you motherfucker. Oh, you were a small talk programmer. How have you never done small
In another
talk?
life, I would have been for sure.
Oh, have you never done small talk? Oh, I do have another stream on sort of the background here where I do some small talk. Okay. So I want to touch on one other thing, which is that came in from the chat, which is C as a first language. what if C was your first language? Are you guys both well familiar with C? Okay.
I cannot say I'm well familiar anymore. No,
Okay.
I haven't
I
written-
work with it in
You
faculty,
have
but I never wrote professionally.
some
I haven't written it for
experience.
8 years,
Fair
but
enough.
I worked with C for a
Fair
couple of
enough.
years.
Okay. If Ruby is a good first language, not a good first second language, what if your first language is C?
Are we talking C before or after the garbage collection was added? The
C.
automatic garbage collection.
That's C++. That's not C.
Objective C, I'm thinking.
Oh, you're thinking of okay. Uh, um,
Yeah, sorry.
Objective C. Are you thinking of auto release, ARC, or are you think of actual objective garbage collection?
It was the arc that I had in mind because it was about that transition that I started working in C, and
Ah, right.
it took me a while to get my head around why is this changing and why is this different.
Aha. Okay. Um. Okay, let's table that one. I come from C at a very at a kernel level understanding. And it's not even that good, by the way. Like, I'm not saying I understand things. When I want to understand how something works in Unix, I read the OpenBSD source code.
Mhm.
Even if the system, like, even if I want to understand how something works on Linux, I will go and read the OpenBSD source code first and fully internalize it, and then I will read the Linux source code and transpose it to a OpenBSD because my fuck Linux is terrible. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Postmodern Mod 3 in the chat claims that they are a C master. Oh wait, no. The C master. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. Okay. Let's round this out. Let's start to sort of wrap this up because we are coming up on, sort of an hour and a half. I don't know how long we actually planned for this fucking thing to take.
I don't know either.
Yeah, we're all in a
I think we
rough
did it.
late evening time zone. I want to talk about why we love Ruby, and I think I would like to hear from Gavin first. Why do you love Ruby?
I think the way my mind is configured, and this is something that I learned about myself in music, is that I love symmetry and I love order and completeness. Like in musical theory, basically it all ties itself together, diatonic harmony and everything. Once you understand it all, you have just this beautiful symmetry, like symmetrical world in front of you. And Ruby gives me that, and other programming languages don't. Every other programming language I've worked with has like awkward quirks and different levels of abstraction within the language itself. And I feel like Ruby, everything is just objects and messages, and there's a beautiful symmetry to it all.
I also love that. And we're gonna have so many conversations about music because I fucking suck at this. Okay. Lucian, why do you love Ruby?
I think if I could find some logical arguments for it, but let me tell you the something more, I'm not sure more deeper, but something different. I think I like Ruby because the code looks beautiful.
Mm.
And what do I mean, I will try to describe this, but it's for me when I open a Ruby code and I put any other code and I don't want to compare it specifically, but the source, the code looks beautiful. It might come maybe from the brevity of it, that I don't know, you don't put too much. There is a less signal to noise, or not less, sorry, a higher signal to noise, or I don't know, less things that are added there which are not needed to make it work, maybe from that. But it just looks beautiful, and I see it. I am. I see it. I have a form, like I'm an engineer as a my faculty, computer science. I was on this real side of it, no arts in my background, but I think it's the closest form of art that I can perform. Um, and this is what I like about Ruby. The substrate of this is that in a way, when I work with it, I feel like I can do anything. That's for me Ruby.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The reason I love Ruby is all of that, because everything I want to do is possible. And the best, the uh, absolute best example of this is belongs to in active record. Belongs to looks like a keyword to people from other languages. But all it is a class method that calls some other shit. Set some shit up, right? And it looks like, to a non-Ruby programmer, belongs to, has many, validates, all of those things that you do in active record. They look like keywords, but they're not.
Mhm.
They're methods. These are messages that you are sending. And that is the most mind-blowing experience for me, is that all those things that look like keywords are just class methods. And it's kind of beautiful when you understand that belongs to and has many and validates and so on are just class methods. When you understand that, it opens your brain a lot. But also, you can get a fucking shitload done in Rails in particular, but in Ruby in general, without knowing what all of these things do. And that immense power is what I love about Ruby, is that the whole system is inspectable and dynamic, and we can see the whole thing. It's introspective, and I love it. I absolutely love that. That's what I love about Ruby, is that everything is understandable in very simple terms. And that is, I have a neighbor in the next village who is not a software person. His job is to install and maintain 5-axis CNC machines. And I can explain how things work to him.
Mhm.
And Ruby gave a lot of that to me, right? Ruby just throws away a lot of the implementation details and lets you focus on the problem you're trying to solve. And that's one of the things I love about it. And I'm so happy about that. So I have not been keeping up on the chat. I apologize, chat people. I'm gonna go through the chat replay and we'll try and get it next week. I know we're keeping Lucian up way past his bedtime. And I apologize. Okay, one last thing, and this is a personal thing. We're gonna wrap up on this. Lucian, where do you live and where you're from?
I'm living currently in Sibiu, Romania, and I'm from Romania. So I remain local.
Oh yeah, you totally look it. Oh yeah, when you showed up, I immediately thought, oh, this is a Romanian dude. Okay, Gavin, where are you from and where do you live?
I'm from Fife, which is on the east coast of Scotland, or as
Fucking
Canadians.
Fife.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Canadians call Scotland Older Scotia, is it? But yeah, so birthplace of golf. Actually, Stephen, you'll hate me for this, but the town that I live is famous for it's the birthplace of Adam Smith. He was born like 2 minutes from where I live now. So
I'm a huge fan of Adam Smith. Adam Smith is not only the birthplace of capitalism. Adam Smith also accurately described all of the problems with capitalism that we are experiencing today. And so I'm a fan. Although I'm not a fan of fucking Fife, but I'm a fan of. So for those of you that don't know, I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia. My family's from Cape Breton. Cape Breton, Nova Scotia is a. Actually, I have a funny story about this. So I'm going to tell it anyway. I described at the Ruby conference a couple of weeks ago. Nova Scotia is a minor fishing province with a large drinking problem. And my son was in Poland with me, and afterwards he said, "You said that where you're from is a minor fishing place with a minor drinking place with a large fishing problem. Was that a joke?" And I said, "No, it's not a joke. It's just funny." And so that's where I'm from. And I moved to Sweden in 2015. So I've been here for almost 10 years. It may have been a mistake or it may have been a benefit. I don't fucking know. I don't even care anymore. I just hang out in the woods in Sweden and play with my old Amigas and my old tractors, and I hope my kids are not too upset that they got moved to this fucking country instead of Canada. It's I have a very complicated relationship with where I live. Yeah, so I think that probably is a reasonable place to wrap it up until next week. Next week we'll get into some of the things that were mentioned in chat that we didn't see this week. I apologize for that. Some of the technical things have technical things are always a problem. Fuck it. And next week I might even not be on the same system. Who knows? But yeah. So you can find us. Let's before we wrap up, let's do one final round, starting with Lucian. Of where can people find you and your lovely and experienced takes on Ruby and Ruby things? Where can people find you, Lucian, online?
Yeah, so in two places. One is I curate a short Ruby newsletter. Ruby newsletter is, you can find it at shortruby.com, and I'm writing sometimes some technical articles on my own blog, which is all about coding.ghynda, my last name.com. I don't know, I'll write it on the chat maybe.
That is a look. You just, how the fuck did you wind up with that domain name? But okay, fair enough. Gavin, where can people find you in the future?
On the website formerly known as Twitter, I'm at Morrice Gavin. So that's my surname, Morrice, Gavin. I have a very poorly maintained Rails blog called handyrailstips.com, which has been going since like 2008. But yeah, hoping to get more content on there. So handyrailstips.com. And you, Steve?
That's a good website.
Oh, that's a great one. All right, awesome. I am Stephen Baker. You can find me at stephenrbaker.com. You can find me on the website formerly known as Twitter. Fuck. I fucking hate that. I'm SR Baker on Twitter, and you can find me there. And I'm also SR Baker on Fostodon. You can find me there as well. StephenRBaker.com is probably the best place to find me. And I guess we'll see you next week.
See y'all.
All right.
Thank you.
See you later. Thank you very much.
Bye.